Well, it is now time for the David Forst Show right here on A's Cast Live as we talk to the general manager, kind of wrapping up the season before, I don't know, maybe going on vacation. We'll check in with him to see how life is. We were just talking about Mookie Betts bowling a 300 again, and he's been doing it since high school. I mean, I would never, bowling was like pitchers of beer and hanging out. You ever get into bowling?
No, not competitively. I mean, for the one or two games that I play, I get competitive about it, but I couldn't be serious about it. It's an impressive skill, though. I've heard stories about his 300s. So, yeah, and I think anybody who bowls a 300 talks about it for like the next 50 years, anyways. So, yeah, good for him.
It would be like you and I going out shooting 64 in golf.
Well, that seems more attainable than a 300, to be honest. You just need to have one good day.
I'm ending the season on this, and I know it's not super popular, but, because the last day with Stephen Vogt was so special, his kids, his family, the last at-bat and everything, and I'm like, that's great. But to me, I'm into the season going, did anybody watch what Ken Waldichuk just did for 7 innings against Shohei Ohtani? I know I'm always looking forward. I was like, hey, the Vogt stuff's great, but look at Waldichuk. I mean, did you start to see what I was seeing towards the end of the season where you start going, okay, there's some kids here that are going to be competitive next year?
Yeah, well, first I can see why that's not a particularly popular stance. The Vogt thing is a lot more fun.
Yeah, no doubt.
It was pretty incredible. There was so much sort of build up to the last series and the last day, and a lot of us knew a lot of the things that were planned for Steven, and including the incredible thing with his kids announcing his first at bat, and we knew that was coming, and then we figured there was no way the actual play on the field was going to stack up to all the other stuff they had planned. And then the guy goes out and hits a homer in his last at bat. So pretty amazing. So I get why the Vogt thing is more popular. But certainly, we noticed what Ken did, not only that start, but the one leading up to it. And then, some of the other things. You and I talked about Jordan Diaz, I think the last time we talked, and he continued to find his hits, and Shea got a couple big hits in that last series. Plus the walk-off walk. So yeah, we're always monitoring those things that bode well for the future.
Yeah, when I think about, the game plan is figuring out how to be competitive next year. In your mind, have you started to look at starting pitching and you start to say, well, Cole Irvin, 30 starts or more. I look at Blackburn comes back. He gives me hopefully 25. If I get 20 out of Waldichuk and Sears and maybe Caprillion, and I got these other guys, do you start to form that in your mind, like the kind of the game plan of what you think could happen for next season?
I think we've done that at pretty much every spot on the field. I was asked the other day we had our end of year sort of wrap up call with the media. We were asked about, what positions you're going to be looking at this offseason, or what do you feel good about? And I think it sort of goes both ways. I mean, there's things we feel really good about everywhere on the field, but there's also just about every spot out there we feel like we could go out and address. And I think I said aside from catching, because I think with Murph and Shea here and some of the depth in the minor leagues, we feel really good about that spot, which is frankly a good place to be confident. But yeah, everywhere else on the field, we've sort of taken stock of what's here, what we've seen in the 64 maybe players who came through here over the course of the 22 season, and thought about who's going to continue to be here. And then, you mentioned the starting pitching, and that group absolutely proved a lot this year, gave us a lot to sort of build off of. But absolutely, it's still a spot you think, okay, what else is out there this offseason? And then you move on to the infield and the outfield, and you do kind of the same math. And okay, we know what we have to some extent, because we did get a lot of experience seeing guys over the last 50 to 60 games of the year. And then put that into the equation of our offseason accounting.
All right, I have a game that we could play for $10 million. You've got to name all 64 players and their numbers. Could you do it?
Not their numbers. No.
$10 million, David. I got the $10 million pyramid. It's yours.
I'm not good with numbers. No, I know the ones that are up on the tarps, but I think I might come up with most of the names, though. I don't know. We added some guys late, so someone might sneak by me, but no, you got me with the numbers.
So this offseason, we were just talking to Mike Petriello from MLB.com, how just, the last few years, my God, what you've been through as an executive when you talk about protecting everybody in the organization with COVID, the shortened season, playing a year after a shortened season. Then all of a sudden you have this lockout. Then you got to move players. Is it just going to be refreshing for you guys to go into a regular off season again?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, we sort of hold our breath a little bit because there's always, who knows what's out there. But yeah, a lot of our conversations, on planning, on budgeting, on personnel have been about the fact that, like, okay, we think we're in the clear. We're going into this off season with a regular schedule, with the regular amount of time to have our conversations and our moves, and then a full spring training next year, which hasn't been the case really for a while. Even the 21 spring training, despite the fact that we had the full amount of time, it was kind of broken up because you had so much COVID protocol going on. So yeah, it's definitely a source of comfort for us right now to think we're going to have a regular off season.
If there was an area that you want to concentrate, I mean, anything can happen, a lot going on here as we're not even out of the playoffs. But right now, if there was an area you want to concentrate on the big club, making the big club more competitive next year, what would that area be?
It's hard to pinpoint one. I mean, I don't even sort of just focus on players. I mean, I think there's staff things, there are front office things that go into that we're focused on upgrading and improving and adding to. So it's hard to sort of say there's one thing. I mean, look, like I said, from a player standpoint, I think there are a number of areas we can address, and that happens through guys coming through the system. It potentially happens through trade conversations, which have been kind of stunted the last 2 years, and ultimately, major and minor league free agency. I mean, all these things are ways that we have access to players right now, and I think we'll take advantage of all of them this offseason.
When you look at a player who you can say he got better, and I know he's at this age, but he's still under control, but this is his prime. Just talk about what you saw from Seth Brown, the man, not only as a player, but as a leader off the field, and especially those last 2 months, how things really changed.
Yeah, well, I mean, as soon as you sort of started that sentence, I was sort of hoping and expecting that's where you were going, to that name, because when you sort of pose that question, like who's the guy who took the biggest leap forward or made the most progress, I mean, Seth has to be the first name that you think of. And from where he came a couple of years ago, and I remember having conversations about whether we thought he might end up going to Asia to play and not get a chance to establish himself here. I mean, he really took a step forward on the field. You saw it in the power, you saw it in his versatility, playing first base and outfield. And then, we really saw it in the clubhouse. I think if you ask Kotz right now, the guys coming back, I mean, who are the guys that set the tone in there? And that's not always the most vocal guy or sort of the most rah-rah, but the guys who work hard, who can sort of silently lead other guys. Seth has to be at the top of that list. And I don't think anybody would have said that a year or two ago. So it's been fun to watch where he got to at the end of this season.
For a lot of us that have been around here for some time, it's just continuity is huge for us, and it's what we expect. And listening to that end of the year Zoom that you guys had, And all of a sudden, here comes, I call him Columbo, the John Shea of the Bay Area media, where he comes in with the question about, hey, you know, are you going to be back? And I'm just saying, why are we asking our front office if they're going to be back? Like, is that just John Shea being his Columbo, always trying to look around the corner? Or like, what? Like, I'm kind of like, well, of course you're going to be back. What the hell are we talking about?
We just answer the questions. So I know he asked Billy a few different ways and a few different times, and as Billy said, he doesn't see a time when he's not part of the A's. So that's stuff we don't really have to worry about much each off season, because we do have so much stability and frankly so much loyalty from the people here that I appreciate. You know, most of the time that's not something we have to factor into our off season planning.
Well, what people need to understand, let's just talk about you, is that you're somebody, you want to be here. You've had multiple chances to leave here and go to another job. Your wife likes it here. You like raising your family here. I think people need to understand where you're like, there's a reason why I'm here. It's because you want to be here, because you could have taken other jobs.
Well, yeah, I appreciate that. The people here are fantastic. This organization is about the people you work with and the opportunities that you get to enjoy that dynamic. And we've gone down the list before, you know, from Billy and Dan all the way down to Eric and Keith and Grady and Ed Sprague and Chris Pitaro, and all these people sort of make this organization what it is. And I think that's why a lot of us have stayed, and a lot of us have been loyal to the A's, because we enjoy who we work with.
You know, when you think about your job now from when you first came in with the A's years ago, and even what Billy was years ago till now, just how much have front offices changed? Just how much has the business of baseball and the way front offices operate, how much has it changed?
The industry has changed a lot, and there's a need for just a lot more hands, a lot more bodies, and it's a bigger job. I mean, you're talking about a lot more money involved. You're talking about a lot more at stake. And, you know, where I came into essentially a 3-person front office with me and Billy and Paul DePodesta, you're talking about factors of 10 now that have changed the size of a front office, and the game demands it. There's so much more information. There's so much more we're able to do and offer to players and staff. And just with the access to impacting the access to info that helps you impact the game. I'm happy we've been able to add to the staff as much as we have. And again, like I said a little earlier, we hope to continue to add and upgrade around here.
Yeah. And the number one thing, you know, it's so true, is the money, you know, because I remember when we were growing up, like when I was in high school in the late 80s and then into college in the early 90s, we were talking about, wow, there was that group of players, right? Like Ricky and Jose and Will Clark and Kirby Puckett. These guys were getting $3-4 million a year. And that just seemed like, wow, $3-4 million a year, to where now you're offering, I don't even know if you call it generational wealth. And when you start talking about $400 million contracts, $300 million contracts, we got a player, Juan Soto, turned down over $400 million. I mean, yeah, the money in all sports, let alone just baseball, but in all sports, is it just mind blowing, the money and the stuff that we don't see that you get to see, that it's just so hard to believe.
Yeah. I mean, obviously the most sort of public or forward facing are player salaries. And they have gone up by, you know, like you said, 3 and 4 million was a big deal in the early 90s, and 30 and 40 million contracts are out there everywhere now. And that, you know, that overflows into all the other things that are happening around the game in terms of, player development and scouting and research and development and all that stuff. You're investing a lot more into the product.
When you think about just, you know, because fans always just care about next season, like how's it going to be next season? I mean, you can project a couple of years down the line, but next season, where do you think you need to shop and get the best possible players to be competitive for next season?
I sort of hesitate to put a limit or kind of narrow it down when, we obviously have a lot of work to do. Anytime you come off a season like we had, I think you can point to any number of places that you can go to improve the team, where to find players, where to make adjustments. So I don't know that there's somewhere specifically that you say we go.
Are there any of the guys at the end of the season? I'll throw one name out there because I know he intrigued me, and I mentioned him to Kotz. I kind of made the body comparison to Brian Giles, dating myself. But Connor Capel kind of remind me. Giles had more a loopy swing. Capel's more of a flatter swing through the zone, but the kind of the body style, that stocky. Capel's interesting to me. Like I'm like, he's a guy that I go, I want to see more of him. Can you give us a couple of those guys where you say to yourself, you brought him in, you gave him an opportunity, and you go, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing more of this guy?
Yeah, Connor's definitely on that list, and again, took advantage of the opportunity, came up late, but got some ABs, had some really big, productive ABs, and played the outfield. He's on that list. We mentioned Jordan Diaz, who found a way to continue getting his hits at every level, including the big leagues. Dermis Garcia had some moments that make you say, hey, I want to see what this guy can do. He's still young, 25 years old, guy who was originally, a bonus baby out of the Dominican and has the pedigree. And we saw the real power, but a guy who sort of got better as his playing time increased. And that's what you look for. I've talked a couple times about Nick Allen and his 2 stints in the big leagues, how from the first to the second one, you saw him catch up a little bit more with the speed of the game. And you saw him do some things that maybe he didn't do the first time he was here early in the season. And that's what you look for is kind of on the fly progress. And Capel hit the ground running. Dermis had better at bats as September went along. And then, the pitchers that you mentioned Waldichuk. Sears is in that same boat. JP did a nice job, with a handful of starts. And some guys in the bullpen. You saw Tyler Sear throw some important innings for us. Again, a guy who was claimed off waivers, similar to Joel Payamps, who you think, okay, like this is a guy who could fit at the back end of a major league game. And I like what he did with the opportunity that Mark and Emo gave him.
And one more baseball. Are you excited of the progress and hopefully the future, which could be even next year, with guys like Soderstrom and Geloff and these guys that you saw make that push at the end to AAA?
Yeah, for sure. There are a lot of real positive things coming out of the minor leagues. I'm going to head down to the fall league next week to see. We've got Geloff, Denzel Clark, Lawrence Butler playing down there, and then a full starting pitching staff basically, and Ginn, Cusack, Miller, and Palouse. So I'm gonna head down and see those guys. But all of those plus Soderstrom, McCann. I'm sure I'm gonna forget some guys. Max Muncy getting to Lansing. There were a lot of positives in player development this year, and a lot of things that help us figure out sort of the timeline going forward of when we feel like guys might be able to contribute in Oakland.
Beyond baseball, what's the big off-season thing for the Forst family?
I got like 4 soccer games to go to every weekend right now. In the last 2 weekends, I've seen Dublin, I've seen Pleasanton, San Ramon, and Danville. I'm up early for one game, coming back for another. I love watching the kids' soccer games right now. So I can't see beyond that through the end of November, really. So, but it's been fun to have the time to do that.
Oh, I'm knee deep in high school football with my kids cheerleading. It's like all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, tomorrow night's the game. They've had Saturday night games, Friday night games. Now they're playing James Lick on Thursday. You're like, oh my, we're at that point in our lives where, I'd love to do a European vacation for 2 weeks, but yet there's always something else going on.
Club soccer, school soccer, and baseball's right around the corner. Maybe I'll have time to take in a Cal Bears football game at some point. But those are our big, exciting plans right now.
Well, I always think that these conversations are unique because of how honest you are. I tell the fans all the time, you've never said, hey, don't ask me this, don't go there. I mean, you answer the questions. You're as honest can be, and it makes for a great show. It makes our show better. I can't tell you how much we appreciated everything you did for us again here on A's Cast and A's Cast Live during the season. So thank you. Enjoy the off season. We'll check in soon. Hopefully we'll see you down in San Diego for the winter meetings.
Well, I appreciate all that, Chris. I really appreciate you and Cody doing this all year, keeping things positive, the fans sticking with us, and I'm looking forward to seeing what we can do this offseason.
Be well.
All right. See you, Tony.